Picture this. You're lying in bed, ready to drift off, and someone mentions Family Guy facts. Suddenly, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree, and sleep becomes impossible. Well, tonight, we're embracing the chaos with the most bizarre, hilarious, and downright shocking facts about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. So get comfortable, because these Family Guy secrets are about to blow your mind. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first time was in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But here's where it gets wild. The show's resurrection had nothing to do with critical acclaim or network executives suddenly realizing their mistake. It was all about DVD sales and late-night reruns on Adult Swim. The fans literally brought this show back from the dead through pure dedication and binge-watching. But that's just the beginning of the madness. Did you know that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11, 2001? He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. The only reason he missed that flight was because he had been out drinking the night before, and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. He showed up to the airport hungover and 15 minutes too late. Talk about a sliding doors moment that changed television history forever. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, this guy is basically a one-man entertainment machine. He doesn't just voice multiple characters on the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie, Glenn Quagmire, and Carter Pewterschmidt, plus several other recurring characters. That means when Peter and Brian are having a conversation, it's literally just Seth talking to himself in different voices. The recording sessions must be absolutely bonkers. Now, here's a fact that'll mess with your head. The show's signature cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, weren't originally part of the plan. They started as a way to fill time when episodes were running short. But they became so popular that they're now considered the show's trademark. Some episodes have been built entirely around these seemingly random interruptions. Let's talk about the characters for a moment, because there are some seriously twisted details hiding beneath the surface. Take Stewie Griffin, the diabolical baby genius. His character was originally inspired by the child character from the British sitcom The Onedin Line, but with a much darker twist. The writers have confirmed that Stewie has an incredibly high body count throughout the series, and we're not talking about toy soldiers here. In various episodes, Stewie has eliminated family members, strangers, celebrities, and even historical figures. There was that time he burned down a playhouse with children inside because he caught his girlfriend cheating. Then there's the episode where he takes out a prostitute with a sniper rifle for absolutely no reason other than target practice. And let's not forget when he dressed up as Santa and traumatized an entire family on Christmas morning, leaving behind what can only be described as a holiday horror scene. But Stewie's kill count gets exponentially more insane when you factor in his partnership with Penelope, his equally psychotic girlfriend. Together, they embarked on a global destruction spree that included bombing the Great Wall of China, destroying the Eiffel Tower, and creating a tidal wave that wiped out Copenhagen. When you add up all the casualties from their international terrorism campaign, we're talking about millions of victims. This baby character has technically committed genocide multiple times. The really disturbing part is how casually the show treats these mass casualty events. They're played for laughs, but when you actually sit down and think about the implications, Stewie Griffin might be one of the most prolific fictional killers in television history. And he's supposed to be a 1-year-old baby. Moving away from the murder and mayhem, let's dive into some behind-the-scenes secrets that are equally fascinating. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically over the years, but not always in ways you'd expect. The early seasons were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show switched to digital animation in later seasons. However, they deliberately kept certain imperfections in the animation to maintain that slightly rough, hand-drawn aesthetic that fans loved. Here's something that'll surprise you about the voice acting. Several major celebrity guest stars have appeared on the show, but many of them recorded their lines over the phone or via video call. This means some of your favorite celebrity cameos were literally phoned in, quite literally. The production team became masters at making these remote recordings sound like they were recorded in the same studio as the main cast. The show's musical numbers are another hidden gem of complexity. Seth MacFarlane, being a professional singer himself, often performs the songs live with a full orchestra. Those elaborate musical sequences you see in episodes aren't just animated afterthoughts. They're often recorded with full big band arrangements, complete with brass sections and professional backup singers. The amount of production value that goes into a 3-minute cartoon musical number rivals what you'd see in actual Broadway shows. But here's where things get really weird with the show's continuity. Family Guy exists in a universe where almost anything can happen, and the writers take full advantage of this freedom. Characters die and come back to life regularly. The family has traveled through time, met their alternate universe selves, and even broken the fourth wall to acknowledge that they're cartoon characters. This narrative flexibility allows for some truly bizarre storylines that would be impossible in live-action television. One of the most mind-bending aspects of the show is how it handles character development, or rather, how it deliberately avoids it. Unlike most long-running series where characters grow and change over time, Family Guy operates on what's essentially a reset button philosophy. No matter what happens in an episode, everyone goes back to their baseline personalities by the next episode. This means Peter can learn valuable life lessons, die, get married again, become president, or transform into a completely different person, and none of it matters the following week. This approach extends to the show's relationship with its own mythology. Remember when Brian died and was replaced by a new dog named Vinny? The fan outrage was so intense that the writers brought Brian back to life just a few episodes later. But rather than pretend the death never happened, they incorporated the resurrection into the show's time travel mythology. It's this kind of meta-storytelling that keeps fans constantly guessing about what's real and what's just another throwaway gag. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends far beyond just being a popular cartoon. The show has influenced internet meme culture in ways that most people don't even realize. That "oh no" chicken fight scene between Peter and the giant chicken has become a template for depicting extended, over-the-top cartoon violence. The "it insists upon itself" quote about The Godfather has become shorthand for pretentious film criticism. And don't even get me started on how many internet arguments have been settled by simply posting a Family Guy cutaway gag. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the show is how it serves as a time capsule for American pop culture over the past 2 decades. Episodes from the early 2000s are filled with references to celebrities, movies, and cultural phenomena that were huge at the time but have since been forgotten. Watching old episodes is like taking a trip through a museum of pop culture history, complete with all the embarrassing fashion choices and forgotten scandals. The show's approach to controversial topics has always been deliberately provocative. The writers seem to take a perverse pleasure in pushing boundaries and seeing how far they can go before someone complains. But here's the thing that's often overlooked. Beneath all the shock value and offensive humor, the show actually has a surprisingly progressive worldview on many social issues. It just packages that progressivism in such outrageous wrapping that people miss the actual message. Take the character of Brian, the family dog. On the surface, he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and has pretensions of being an intellectual. But Brian often serves as the show's moral compass, calling out the other characters when they do terrible things. His relationship with the family, particularly with Stewie, represents some of the show's most genuine emotional moments. When Brian temporarily died, the fan reaction wasn't just about losing a funny character. People were genuinely heartbroken because Brian represented the heart of the show. The animation team behind Family Guy has developed some truly innovative techniques over the years. Those elaborate fight scenes, particularly the ones involving Peter and the giant chicken, require months of planning and animation work. The sequences are choreographed like actual action movies, with careful attention paid to pacing, camera angles, and dramatic timing. The fact that all this effort goes into animating a man fighting a poultry mascot is both absurd and oddly impressive. Here's a production secret that most fans don't know. The show's writers often create multiple versions of controversial jokes, starting with the most extreme version and then gradually toning it down until they find something that Fox will actually allow on television. This means, for every outrageous joke that makes it into an episode, there are probably 3 or 4 even more outrageous versions sitting in a file somewhere. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive. There are Family Guy branded everything from coffee mugs to car accessories to clothing lines. But the most surprising merchandising success has been Stewie Griffin baby products. Yes, parents are apparently comfortable decorating their nurseries with imagery of a homicidal infant genius. The irony is probably lost on most consumers, but it's definitely not lost on the show's creators. One aspect of the show that deserves more recognition is its musical sophistication. Seth MacFarlane's background as a professional musician shows up constantly in the series. The show regularly features complex musical arrangements, sophisticated harmonies, and genre pastiche that demonstrates a deep understanding of American musical traditions. When Family Guy does a musical number, it's not just a cartoon singing a silly song, it's often a legitimate piece of musical entertainment that could stand on its own. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated. While Fox allows Family Guy to get away with content that would never fly on network television during prime time, the show still operates under certain restrictions. The writers have become masters at implying things they can't show directly. Sometimes the most shocking moments happen entirely off-screen, letting your imagination fill in the disturbing details. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's comedy philosophy. The show doesn't just break the fourth wall occasionally, it demolishes the fourth wall completely and then rebuilds it just so it can break it again. Characters regularly acknowledge that they're in a television show, comment on their own animation style, and even complain about changes in their voice actors. This level of meta-humor was revolutionary when the show started, and it's still pushing boundaries today. The international versions of Family Guy are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in wildly different ways. Some countries censor entire episodes, while others rewrite dialogue completely to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. There are probably versions of Family Guy exist where the characters are having completely different conversations while their mouths move to the original English dialogue. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's bizarre universe, it's worth reflecting on why these facts are so compelling. There's something oddly comforting about learning the secrets behind a show that's designed to be completely unpredictable. Even when Family Guy is at its most chaotic and nonsensical, there are real people behind the scenes making deliberate, creative choices, putting enormous effort into crafting these moments of animated insanity. The show has managed to maintain its relevance for over 2 decades by constantly evolving while never losing its core identity. It's simultaneously one of the most juvenile shows on television and one of the most sophisticated pieces of pop culture commentary ever created. That contradiction is probably the most Family Guy thing of all. So the next time you're channel surfing and stumble across a Family Guy rerun, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're experiencing a complex piece of entertainment that represents millions of hours of creative work, countless cultural references, and enough behind-the-scenes drama to fill several seasons of reality television. Sweet dreams, and may your Family Guy nightmares be filled with giant chicken fights and Stewie's diabolical laughter echoing through your subconscious. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless YouTube videos at 2 a.m., your brain craving something familiar yet fascinating to drift off to. Well, buckle up because I've got a treasure trove of Family Guy secrets that'll either help you sleep peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this animated chaos machine actually works. From behind-the-scenes drama to mind-bending production facts, these random tidbits about the Griffin family will give your brain exactly what it needs for that perfect sleepy time content. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. The voice of Stewie Griffin, that diabolical baby genius we all know and love, is performed by the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane himself. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. MacFarlane originally based Stewie's voice on the legendary actor Rex Harrison, who played Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That posh, sophisticated British accent that makes Stewie sound like he stepped out of a Victorian manor. It's basically a baby doing an impression of a 1,960 seconds Broadway star. The irony is delicious when you think about it. This character who spends half his time plotting world domination is essentially channeling a musical theater legend. Now, if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the show's near-death experience that almost prevented it from becoming the cultural phenomenon we know today. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and for a hot minute there, it looked like the Griffin family was done for good. But then something magical happened that literally brought the show back from the dead. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created such a massive fan following that Fox had no choice but to resurrect it in 2005. It's like the show became a zombie that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to life through sheer fan devotion. The creation story of Family Guy itself reads like something out of a fever dream. Seth MacFarlane was just 24 years old when he pitched the show to Fox, making him one of the youngest people ever to create and run their own animated series for a major network. He literally animated the entire pilot episode by himself, spending months hunched over a desk drawing frame after frame while surviving on probably nothing but coffee and determination. The original pitch was actually inspired by his college thesis film called The Life of Larry, which featured a middle-aged man with a talking dog. Sound familiar? That little student film eventually evolved into the multi-million-dollar empire we know today. Speaking of that talking dog, Brian Griffin holds a special place in animation history for reasons you probably never considered. Unlike most cartoon pets who remain perpetually animal-like, Brian is essentially a human character who just happens to be a dog. He drives cars, drinks martinis, writes novels, and engages in complex philosophical debates. McFarlane has stated that Brian represents his own voice in the show more than any other character, which explains why the dog often serves as the moral compass of the family. It's basically McFarlane having conversations with himself through a talking animal, which, when you think about it, is either brilliant or slightly concerning. The show's controversial humor didn't emerge by accident. It was a carefully calculated rebellion against traditional family sitcoms. McFarlane deliberately set out to create the anti-Simpsons, something that would push every boundary the Simpsons wouldn't touch. Where the Simpsons used gentle satire and heartwarming family moments, Family Guy went nuclear with shock, humor, and deliberately offensive content. The cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences that became the show's signature, were originally McFarlane's solution to a problem he had with traditional sitcom pacing. He wanted to break free from the constraints of linear storytelling and create something that felt more like channel surfing through a fever dream. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the craft behind the chaos. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. That means the episodes you're watching right now were being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process alone involves hundreds of artists working across multiple studios, with the initial designs created in California before being sent overseas for full animation. It's like a massive international relay race, where each handoff has to be perfect or the whole episode falls apart. The voice acting sessions are apparently legendary affairs that sound more like comedy improv shows than traditional recording sessions. McFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Brian, Peter, and Glenn Quagmire, often having entire conversations with himself in the recording booth. The other voice actors have described watching him switch between characters mid-sentence as both impressive and slightly unsettling. Imagine seeing someone argue with themselves in 4 different voices while maintaining perfect character consistency. It's basically like watching a one-man theater performance in real time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writer's room operates. Unlike many animated shows that plan seasons far in advance, Family Guy's writing process is notoriously chaotic and last-minute. Writers have described sessions where entire episodes get scrapped days before animation begins, leading to frantic rewrites and sleepless nights. This seat-of-the-pants approach actually contributes to the show's unpredictable energy, but it also means that voice actors sometimes receive new scripts literally hours before recording sessions. The show's relationship with censorship has been a constant dance between pushing boundaries and avoiding network wrath. Family Guy has developed an almost scientific approach to testing limits, deliberately writing jokes that are slightly more offensive than what they actually want to air, knowing that network censors will demand cuts. The final version that reaches viewers is often the writer's actual intended content, achieved through strategic overwriting and negotiation. It's psychological warfare, disguised as comedy writing. McFarlane's musical background plays a much larger role in the show than most people realize. Before creating Family Guy, he was actually a jazz vocalist and pianist, which explains the numerous musical numbers scattered throughout episodes. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just random comedy bits. They're genuine musical theater productions compressed into cartoon format. McFarlane has stated that he views Family Guy as partly a variety show, using the Griffin family as a framework to showcase different types of entertainment within each episode. The character designs themselves tell an interesting story about animation philosophy. Notice how the Griffin family members all have distinctly different body shapes and facial structures, unlike many cartoon families where everyone looks like variations of the same template. Peter's round, doughy appearance was specifically designed to contrast with Lois's sharp, angular features, while Stewie's football-shaped head was meant to make him instantly recognizable even in silhouette. These design choices weren't arbitrary. They were carefully calculated to ensure each character would be visually distinct even in crowded scenes or quick cuts. Here's something that'll change how you watch the show forever. The infamous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned as recurring segments. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but the animation team had so much fun creating the over-the-top action sequence that it became a running theme. Those elaborate, destruction-filled battles that seem to last forever? They're essentially the animation team showing off their action sequence skills in a comedy show, like flexing creative muscles that don't usually get exercised in traditional sitcom animation. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely twisted compared to other animated series. While most cartoons treat celebrity appearances as special events, with the famous person playing themselves or a character clearly meant to be them, Family Guy often buries celebrity voices in minor roles without any fanfare. A-list actors will voice background characters for single lines, and viewers might never realize they just heard a famous person deliver a throwaway joke. It's the entertainment industry equivalent of hiding expensive ingredients in cheap fast food. Family Guy's international versions reveal fascinating cultural differences in humor. In some countries, entire episodes have been rewritten because the original jokes simply don't translate, not just linguistically, but culturally. What Americans find hilarious might be completely incomprehensible to audiences in other parts of the world, leading to localized versions that are essentially different shows with the same characters. It's like each country gets its own flavor of the Griffin family chaos, tailored to local sensibilities. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy extends into some surprisingly niche markets. Beyond the obvious t-shirts and DVDs, there are Family Guy-themed wine collections, luxury watches, and even high-end collectible sculptures that cost thousands of dollars. The show that built its reputation on lowbrow humor has somehow spawned upscale merchandise that wouldn't look out of place in expensive boutiques. It's cultural cognitive dissonance at its finest. The writing staff includes people from incredibly diverse backgrounds: former stand-up comedians, Harvard graduates, television veterans, and complete newcomers to the industry. This mix creates a unique creative environment where highbrow intellectual humor crashes into street-level comedy instincts. The result is a show that can reference obscure philosophical concepts in one scene and make fart jokes in the next, often within the same episode. Animation errors in Family Guy have become something of a cult fascination among fans. Unlike other shows that try to hide mistakes, Family Guy occasionally leaves obvious animation goofs in the final product, either intentionally, as Easter eggs, or because the production schedule doesn't allow for fixes. These errors have spawned online communities dedicated to spotting and cataloging every miscolored character, floating object, or impossible perspective. It's accidental, interactive entertainment, where viewers become detectives hunting for visual inconsistencies. The show's theme song, that bouncy piano melody everyone knows by heart, was originally much longer and included additional verses that were cut for time. The full version tells a more complete story about the Griffin family's dynamics, but network television's rigid timing requirements forced it down to the bare essentials. MacFarlane has occasionally performed the complete version at live concerts, giving fans a glimpse of what could have been the opening sequence if television had more flexible formatting. Voice acting for animated shows requires a completely different skill set than live-action performance, and Family Guy pushes these demands to extremes. The actors often need to deliver lines while laughing, crying, or even while their characters are supposed to be eating, fighting, or running. This means recording sessions frequently involve voice actors doing physical comedy performances in sound booths, acting out entire scenes with just their voices, while making exaggerated facial expressions that no one will ever see, but that somehow make the vocal performance more authentic. The show's relationship with current events creates unique production challenges. Because episodes take months to complete, jokes about contemporary issues often feel dated by the time they air, leading to a complex balancing act between topical relevance and timeless humor. Writers have developed strategies for creating content that feels current without being tied to specific news cycles, though sometimes they get caught off guard when major events happen during production and their carefully planned episodes suddenly seem tone-deaf or prescient in ways they never intended. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond just memes and viral videos. The show's cutaway gag structure essentially predicted how people would consume media in the social media age. Short, disconnected bursts of content that don't require following a linear narrative. Those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story? They're basically the television equivalent of scrolling through TikTok or Twitter, jumping from one unrelated thought to another without warning. The economics behind Family Guy reveal interesting insights into how modern television actually works. Despite being an animated show with relatively high production costs, it's incredibly profitable because animated content doesn't age the same way live-action shows do. There are no aging actors demanding higher salaries, no physical sets that deteriorate, and no location shoots that become impossible due to changing landscapes. The Griffin family can theoretically exist forever without any of the logistical problems that eventually kill most television series. Behind all the controversy and chaos, Family Guy operates like a massive creative experiment in pushing the boundaries of what television can be. Every episode is essentially asking the question, what if we tried this completely ridiculous thing and somehow made it work within the framework of a family sitcom? Sometimes the experiments fail spectacularly, but when they succeed, they create moments of television that are genuinely unlike anything else on the air. The show has created its own internal mythology that's become increasingly complex over the years. Character relationships, running gags, and callback references have built up layers of continuity that reward longtime viewers while potentially confusing newcomers. It's like a secret club where the membership requirement is having watched hundreds of hours of animated chaos, and the reward is understanding jokes that are incomprehensible to everyone else. And here's perhaps the most interesting fact about Family Guy. Despite all its success and cultural impact, the show remains fundamentally unpredictable. After more than 2 decades on the air, it can still surprise viewers with completely unexpected creative choices, bizarre guest appearances, or experimental episodes that break its own established rules. In a television landscape increasingly dominated by formulaic content, Family Guy maintains a chaotic creativity that keeps audiences guessing what might happen next. So there you have it, a deep dive into the wonderfully weird world behind one of television's most controversial animated families. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying wide awake in fascination, these facts reveal just how much complexity hides behind what appears to be simple cartoon chaos. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the Griffin household, normal is just another word for boring. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons' worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they pushed things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy episodes feel like fever dreams that somehow make perfect sense at 3 in the morning? Tonight, we're diving into the most bizarre, unexpected, and downright weird facts about this animated chaos machine that's been keeping us entertained and slightly disturbed for over 2 decades. From secret celebrity cameos you never noticed to production secrets that will change how you watch every episode, these facts are perfect for those late-night rabbit holes when your brain needs something wonderfully random to chew on. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped animation studio, probably surviving on nothing but coffee and pure creative madness, sketching out what would become one of television's most unpredictable shows. But here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy was actually rejected by multiple networks before Fox finally took a chance on it. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that Peter Griffin didn't even have his signature chin dimple. That's right, the most recognizable feature of television's most chaotic dad was an afterthought added later in development. Speaking of Peter Griffin's design, here's a fact that will blow your mind every time you see him on screen. Seth MacFarlane has admitted that Peter's appearance was directly inspired by a security guard he encountered at his college. This unnamed hero of late-night campus safety became the visual foundation for a character who would go on to terrorize animated television for decades. Imagine being that security guard and randomly discovering years later that you're the face of one of America's most beloved cartoon disasters. But the real magic happens when you start digging into the voice acting secrets. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice the main characters, he performs Stewie, Brian, Peter, and several recurring characters, often having entire conversations with himself during recording sessions. The studio engineers have described these solo recording sessions as watching someone have the world's most entertaining mental breakdown. MacFarlane literally argues with himself, switches between character voices mid-sentence, and somehow maintains the distinct personality of each character flawlessly. Here's where things get really interesting from a production standpoint. The show's writers have a tradition called the random joke jar, where they collect the most absurd, context-free gags throughout the season. When they're stuck on an episode or need to fill time, they literally reach into this jar and randomly select bizarre scenarios to animate. This explains why you'll be watching a normal family dinner scene that suddenly cuts to a 3-minute sequence about a time-traveling sandwich. It's not lazy writing. It's intentionally chaotic creativity with a system behind the madness. The cutaway gags that make Family Guy so distinctive weren't originally planned to be such a huge part of the show. In early episodes, they used these random flashbacks sparingly. But when they noticed these moments got the biggest laughs and the most social media attention, they leaned into the format completely. Now, these seemingly random interruptions are carefully crafted to hit specific comedic beats and often take longer to animate than the main storyline of entire episodes. One of the most mind-bending facts involves the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Many A-list celebrities have appeared on Family Guy without most viewers ever realizing it because their characters are so obscure or brief. Drew Barrymore once voiced a background character who had exactly 3 words of dialogue spread across 2 episodes. The producers love casting major stars in tiny roles as inside jokes for the industry, creating this weird Hollywood treasure hunt for eagle-eyed fans. The character of Stewie Griffin underwent one of television's most subtle character evolutions. In early seasons, Stewie was genuinely intended to be an evil genius, baby-plotting world domination. But as the show progressed, the writers began exploring his character's vulnerability and intelligence in different ways. The transition was so gradual that most viewers didn't consciously notice when Stewie evolved from potential supervillain to the show's emotional center and Brian's best friend. This character development happened organically through hundreds of small writing decisions across multiple seasons. Here's something that will change how you watch every Brian and Stewie episode. Their relationship was originally supposed to remain antagonistic throughout the series. The writers planned for Brian to be constantly annoyed by Stewie's schemes and intellectual pretensions. However, the voice acting chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's 2 characters was so natural and compelling that the writers began crafting episodes specifically around their friendship. Some of the show's most acclaimed episodes, including the time travel and multiverse adventures, exist purely because the Brian-Stewie dynamic became too interesting to ignore. The animation process for Family Guy involves secrets that most fans never consider. Each episode requires approximately 4 months from initial script to final animation, but here's the weird part. They often animate scenes completely out of order, based on character availability and studio scheduling. This means the emotional arc of an episode might be animated backwards, with the climactic scenes completed weeks before the setup scenes. The animators have to maintain character continuity and emotional consistency without seeing the full episode in sequence until the very end of production. Musical numbers in Family Guy aren't just random comedic choices. They serve a specific psychological function in the show's pacing. The writers discovered that musical sequences reset viewer attention spans and create natural breaks in the chaotic energy that defines most episodes. When you feel overwhelmed by rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags, a musical number gives your brain permission to reset and re-engage with the storyline. It's basically psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and it works perfectly. The show's relationship with censorship creates some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories. Family Guy pushes boundaries so consistently that the network has entire meetings dedicated to determining what crosses the line versus what's cleverly subversive. The writers have become experts at crafting jokes that technically comply with broadcast standards while still managing to be completely inappropriate. They've turned censorship navigation into its own art form, often making the censored versions of jokes funnier than the original uncensored concepts. Here's a fact that demonstrates the show's cultural impact in ways you might not expect. Family Guy references have been spotted in congressional hearings, Supreme Court footnotes, and international diplomatic communications. Politicians and legal scholars apparently watch the show and unconsciously incorporate its humor patterns into serious discourse. There's something simultaneously hilarious and terrifying about the idea that Stewie Griffin's speech patterns are influencing actual government policy discussions. The economics behind Family Guy reveal fascinating insights into modern television production. Each episode costs significantly more to produce than most people realize because of the sheer amount of custom animation required for cutaway gags. A single random flashback sequence might require creating entirely new character designs, backgrounds, and animation styles that will never be used again. The show essentially produces mini-movies within every episode, making it one of the most expensive animated series on television, despite its seemingly simple art style. Voice recording sessions for Family Guy episodes are legendary among industry professionals for their complete unpredictability. Seth MacFarlane often improvises entire scenes in character, creating alternate versions of jokes that the writers never conceived. Sometimes these improvised moments are so funny that entire episode plots get rewritten around a single spontaneous line delivery. The recording booth becomes this weird laboratory where cartoon characters take on lives of their own and influence their own storylines. The show's treatment of controversial topics follows a specific comedy philosophy that Seth MacFarlane has described as equal opportunity offense. The writing team maintains detailed charts tracking which groups, topics, and themes they've targeted to ensure their irreverence remains balanced across the political and social spectrum. This systematic approach to controversy means every offensive joke is part of a larger pattern designed to prevent the show from developing any consistent political agenda beyond general chaos. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was actually conceived as a way to explore Family Guy's universe from a completely different perspective while maintaining the same comedic DNA. The failed experiment taught the creators valuable lessons about what makes Family Guy specifically work versus what elements translate to other formats. Cleveland's return to Family Guy brought with him subtle character changes informed by his solo series experience, creating this weird continuity where a character evolved through his own failed show. The internet age has transformed how Family Guy episodes are created and consumed. The writers now monitor social media reactions to episodes in real time and adjust future storylines based on which jokes generate the most memes and viral moments. This feedback loop means the show is constantly evolving to match internet culture while simultaneously influencing internet culture. It's become this weird, symbiotic relationship where the show and its online fan base co-create content together. Animation errors in Family Guy often become intentional running gags when fans notice and celebrate them online. The production team has learned to embrace happy accidents, sometimes deliberately recreating animation mistakes in future episodes as callbacks to their own imperfections. This self-aware approach to production errors creates additional layers of humor for dedicated fans while maintaining accessibility for casual viewers. The show's influence on other animated series is more extensive than most people realize. Writing techniques, character development approaches, and comedic timing patterns pioneered by Family Guy appear throughout modern animated television. Shows that seem completely different often use Family Guy's structural innovations adapted to their own specific styles and audiences. It's become the secret template for contemporary animated comedy without most viewers consciously recognizing the influence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are probably working on next season's episodes, crafting new combinations of chaos and creativity that will eventually become someone else's late-night viewing experience. Family Guy continues to exist in this weird space between sophisticated entertainment and absolute nonsense, providing the perfect mental soundtrack for those moments when your brain needs something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on while the rest of the world sleeps. The show's legacy isn't just about the jokes or the characters. It's about proving that television audiences are capable of appreciating complexity disguised as simplicity, intelligence hidden within apparent randomness, and genuine emotional moments embedded in absolute chaos. Sweet dreams, and may your unconscious mind sort through all this delightful weirdness while you rest.
Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, Someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about mail. Condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The Internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. What if I told you that one cartoon dad has a higher body count than most movie villains? Today we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Peter Griffin and counting every single person this animated maniac has eliminated. Trust me, the numbers are absolutely insane. Most people think Peter Griffin is just a lovable goofball who makes stupid mistakes. But when you actually sit down and track his actions across hundreds of Family Guy episodes, a terrifying pattern emerges. This isn't just some clumsy dad bumbling through life. This is a walking disaster zone who leaves destruction wherever he goes. I spent weeks combing through every Family Guy episode, taking notes, rewinding scenes, and meticulously documenting each incident. What I discovered shocked me. Peter Griffin isn't just accidentally dangerous. He's legitimately one of the most prolific killers in television history. And the worst part? He never faces any real consequences. Let's start from the very beginning with Peter's first confirmed elimination. In only the second episode of the entire series, Peter runs down the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes while driving. Just flattens the poor bird completely. When asked if he hit something, Peter casually dismisses it and keeps driving. That casual attitude toward taking a life, it sets the tone for everything that follows. The very next episode, things escalate dramatically. A tour bus pulls up to the Griffin house, and Peter completely loses his mind. He grabs a shotgun and opens fire on the entire vehicle. 3 people eliminated just like that. His reaction to seeing strangers at his door was immediate violence. No questions asked. No attempt at communication. Just grab a weapon and start shooting. Then there's the hospital incident that really showcases Peter's dangerous incompetence. Somehow this man was allowed to work as a doctor, which should have been a red flag for everyone involved. During what appears to be a routine procedure, Peter's negligence directly leads to a patient's death. The fact that he was even permitted near medical equipment shows a serious breakdown in the system. But Peter's killing spree really picks up steam when he temporarily takes over Death's job. With supernatural powers at his disposal, Peter becomes exponentially more dangerous. He kills 2 airline pilots mid-flight simply by touching them. Thousands of passengers could have died if not for quick thinking from another character who managed to land the plane. Peter's reaction to nearly causing a massive aviation disaster? He jokes about needing mittens. The pattern becomes clear early on. Peter has zero regard for human life and even less understanding of consequences. When tasked with simple babysitting duties, he leaves an infant to drown in a bathtub. His parenting instincts are so fundamentally broken that he can't even keep a baby alive for one evening. Speaking of children, Peter's relationship with kids is consistently disturbing. When he briefly works as a nanny dressed up like Mary Poppins, 2 children end up dead and hidden under a bed. These weren't accidents or misunderstandings. Peter's presence in any childcare situation inevitably leads to tragedy. But the really chilling moments come when Peter turns his violence toward his own family. In one episode, his negligence with home repairs leads to carbon monoxide poisoning that kills Lois, Chris, and Meg. Even though they're miraculously fine in the next episode, Peter's actions directly cause their deaths. A husband and father who accidentally kills his entire family should be traumatized for life. Peter just moves on like nothing happened. The mob-style execution of Brian over some leftover food shows Peter's capacity for cold-blooded murder. When his dog eats his chicken and drinks his cream soda, Peter responds with gangster-level violence. The casual way he eliminates a family member over such trivial matters reveals the true depth of his sociopathic tendencies. Peter's parenting philosophy seems to involve extreme violence as conflict resolution. When his daughter faces bullying at school, instead of speaking to teachers or parents, Peter takes matters into his own hands. The bully doesn't survive the encounter. Later, when presenting what he thinks is the bully's head to his son, Peter admits he got the wrong kid entirely. He murdered an innocent deaf child by mistake and shows no remorse whatsoever. The axe murder of Cleveland represents a turning point where Peter's violence becomes increasingly graphic and disturbing. This isn't cartoon slapstick anymore. This is genuine horror movie material. The casual way Peter wields deadly weapons against friends and neighbors shows a complete break from reality and basic human decency. From this point forward, Peter's methods become increasingly brutal, and his body count starts climbing exponentially. The chainsaw massacres alone account for dozens of victims. Peter goes from house to house like a serial killer, methodically eliminating anyone in his path. The fact that he seems to enjoy this level of violence makes it even more disturbing. One of the most senseless killings involves Peter murdering a child just to steal a jet ski. When his family points out they're literally standing next to their boat, Peter ignores them and commits homicide anyway. This isn't about necessity or even twisted logic. This is pure evil masked as comedy. The restaurant incident where Peter kills a woman named Erica while trying to prove his cooking skills demonstrates how his ego and incompetence create deadly combinations. Peter's need to show off constantly puts innocent people in mortal danger. Peter's involvement in sports inevitably leads to casualties. Every athletic activity he participates in somehow results in someone's death. Whether it's shot put, treasure hunting, or any other recreational activity, Peter transforms harmless fun into lethal encounters. The drunk driving incidents reveal another layer of Peter's criminal behavior. He openly admits to calculating exactly how much alcohol he can consume while still being able to drive. This premeditated approach to endangering others shows Peter knows his actions are dangerous, but simply doesn't care about the consequences. The Boston Marathon Massacre stands out as one of Peter's most heinous acts. Running down dozens of innocent runners during a major sporting event crosses the line from accidental violence into mass murder territory. The casualty count from this single incident rivals actual terrorist attacks. Peter's racism leads to deadly encounters as well. His casual bigotry creates situations where innocent people lose their lives simply for existing in Peter's presence. The anthropology store incident perfectly captures how Peter's prejudices fuel his violent tendencies. When Peter briefly becomes death incarnate, his kill count skyrockets through supernatural means. Having the literal power of life and death in Peter's hands is like giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. The pilots who die simply from Peter's touch represent just the beginning of the carnage. The hospital bombings showcase Peter's evolution into full-scale terrorism. Destroying entire medical facilities because he disagrees with vaccines makes Peter an anti-science extremist willing to commit mass murder for his beliefs. The estimated casualty counts from these attacks reach into the hundreds. Peter's accidental involvement with actual terrorists leads to multiple explosive incidents. His friendship with a terrorist operative results in several bombings throughout the city. Even when Peter tries to do the right thing by helping authorities, he ends up triggering more explosions that kill dozens of innocent people. The secret society incident demonstrates Peter's capacity for large-scale destruction. Burning down an entire facility housing historical documents leads to hundreds of deaths. Peter's inability to consider consequences means every action he takes has the potential for massive collateral damage. The presidential fight with Donald Trump represents the peak of Peter's destructive potential. Their brawl triggers nuclear missile launches that devastate multiple population centers. The casualty count from this single incident reaches into the thousands. Peter literally causes acts of war through his inability to control his temper. But none of Peter's individual acts of violence compare to his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This running conflict has resulted in more deaths and destruction than actual wars. Every encounter between these two characters leaves dozens of innocent bystanders dead. Their first major battle destroys multiple vehicles, causes plane crashes, and brings down entire buildings. The Ferry Wheel incident alone accounts for hundreds of casualties, as the massive structure rolls through populated areas. Their fights aren't contained conflicts between two individuals. They're citywide disasters that claim enormous numbers of innocent lives. The cruise ship battle represents the most destructive single incident in their ongoing war. When their fight moves into the engine room, they lose control of a massive passenger vessel that crashes into a major city. The resulting destruction levels multiple city blocks and kills hundreds of people. This single incident qualifies as one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Their time travel battle creates paradoxes that threaten the fabric of reality itself. When Peter and Ernie use time manipulation technology to continue their fight across multiple historical periods, they create cascading effects that alter the course of human history. The scientist who created the time machine becomes an early casualty of their temporal warfare. The NASA facility destruction shows how their conflict has escalated beyond Earth itself. Their space battle crashes back to the planet and destroys an ocean oil rig, adding environmental disaster to their already impressive list of crimes against humanity. The reverse time sequence battle creates some of the most confusing and deadly encounters in their entire conflict. When everything starts happening backwards, the destruction becomes even more widespread and incomprehensible. Plane crashes, building collapses, and mass casualties all blend together in a chaotic symphony of violence. When you calculate the total casualties from just the Peter versus Ernie conflicts, the number reaches nearly 1,500 deaths. This means half of Peter's entire body count comes from a single ongoing dispute that started over an expired coupon. The fact that such trivial origins led to such massive destruction perfectly encapsulates Peter's character. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcases Peter's ability to bring his destructive tendencies to other fictional universes. His fight with Homer Simpson levels significant portions of Springfield and adds another 100 casualties to his count. Even when visiting other shows, Peter cannot help but create mayhem and death. Throughout all of these incidents, certain patterns emerge that make Peter's behavior even more disturbing. He shows no remorse for any of his actions. He never learns from his mistakes or attempts to modify his behavior. Most importantly, he faces no meaningful consequences for any of his crimes. The legal system in Peter's universe seems completely incapable of holding him accountable. Despite committing mass murder on multiple occasions, Peter continues to walk free and repeat his destructive patterns. This creates a world where violence has no consequences and human life has no value. Peter's family and friends enable his behavior by treating his mass murder sprees as minor inconveniences rather than serious crimes. When someone consistently kills innocent people, the appropriate response is not to laugh it off and wait for the next episode. The normalization of Peter's violence makes everyone around him complicit in his crimes. The media within Peter's world also fails to adequately report on his actions. Despite causing multiple disasters that should dominate news cycles for months, Peter's crimes are quickly forgotten and life returns to normal. This unrealistic portrayal of consequences sends dangerous messages about accountability and justice. When you add up every death directly attributable to Peter Griffin's actions, the final count reaches approximately 2,800 people. This makes him one of the most prolific killers in entertainment history. For context, this body count exceeds many actual historical mass murderers and rivals casualty figures from major military conflicts. The fact that this level of violence is presented as comedy raises serious questions about desensitization to violence in media. When mass murder becomes a punchline, society loses important moral boundaries that separate acceptable behavior from criminal acts. Peter Griffin represents the logical extreme of consequence-free violence in entertainment. His character demonstrates what happens when someone with destructive tendencies faces no accountability for their actions. The result is escalating violence that eventually reaches genocidal proportions. The most disturbing aspect of Peter's character is how his violence is often portrayed as justified or at least understandable. Whether defending his family, pursuing his goals, or simply satisfying his curiosity, Peter's murderous actions are presented within contexts that make them seem reasonable to viewers. This normalization of extreme violence has real-world implications for how audiences process and respond to actual violence in their daily lives. When fictional characters commit mass murder without consequences, it becomes easier to dismiss real violence as less serious than it actually is. The Peter Griffin phenomenon also reveals how comedy can be used to mask serious social problems. By presenting his violent tendencies as humorous character quirks rather than serious mental health issues, the show avoids confronting the deeper implications of his behavior. In conclusion, Peter Griffin's body count of 2,800 people makes him one of the deadliest characters in television history. His casual approach to mass murder, combined with the complete lack of consequences he faces, creates a character who embodies the worst aspects of unchecked violence and social irresponsibility. While Family Guy presents his actions as comedy, the sheer scale of death and destruction he causes reveals a character who belongs in prison rather than primetime television. Hey there, Night Owls and Family Guy fanatics! Before you drift off to dreamland, let me take you on a journey through the twisted world of Quahog and its unforgettable residents. Tonight we're diving deep into the most beloved and despised characters from Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the wild personalities that have kept us laughing and cringing for over 2 decades. Picture this: a small Rhode Island town where a talking baby plots world domination. A paralyzed cop remains the voice of reason, and a dog walks upright while nursing his literary pretensions. This is the bizarre universe of Family Guy, where moral compasses spin wildly and character development takes unexpected turns. Some residents of Quahog have captured our hearts with their quirky charm, while others have become the targets of fan frustration and outright hatred. What makes a Family Guy character lovable versus loathsome? Is it their moral fiber, their comedic timing, or simply how much chaos they create? As we journey through this character analysis, you'll discover why certain personalities have endured as fan favorites, while others have fallen from grace, becoming symbols of everything wrong with the show's direction. Let's begin our exploration with Joe Swanson, a character who stands out like a beacon of decency in an ocean of dysfunction. In a show filled with morally questionable individuals, Joe represents something genuinely admirable. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, he never allows his disability to define his worth or limit his capabilities as a police officer. His determination and positive attitude shine through even in the darkest episodes. What makes Joe so endearing is his refusal to play the victim. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he embraces his condition with humor and grace. The self-deprecating jokes about his wheelchair become running gags that work precisely because Joe himself doesn't view his disability as a weakness. He's shown time and again that physical limitations cannot diminish his strength, courage, or effectiveness as both an officer and a friend. Remember that powerful episode where Joe temporarily regained the use of his legs? The transformation was startling. Power corrupted him almost instantly, turning our beloved reasonable Joe into an insufferable, cocky version of himself. It took his friends literally breaking his legs again to restore the Joe we knew and loved. This storyline brilliantly demonstrated that Joe's wheelchair wasn't a limitation, but rather an integral part of what made him special. Joe's genuine kindness shines through in his interactions with others, particularly in how he handles Meg's crush on him. Rather than humiliating her or making the situation awkward, he lets her down gently, showing the consideration and maturity that separates him from his less evolved friends. His relationship with Bonnie may have its challenges, but Joe consistently approaches their problems with patience and understanding. The contrast becomes stark when we examine Chris Griffin, who represents the opposite end of the likability spectrum. Chris has undergone one of the most disappointing character transformations in the series. What began as an awkward but relatably sweet teenager has devolved into something far more disturbing. His evolution from lovable oddball to creepy, perverted dunce has left many fans wondering what happened to the Chris they once enjoyed. Early Chris possessed an innocent goofiness that made his mistakes forgivable. He was weird, sure, but in an endearing way that reminded viewers of their own awkward teenage years. However, as seasons progressed, the writers seemed to drain all charm from his character, replacing it with increasingly disturbing behavior patterns that mirror his father's worst traits without any of the redeeming humor. The breaking point for many fans came during this episode where Chris's response to bullying involved kidnapping Stewie and locking him in a backpack. This wasn't just stupid or misguided. It revealed a genuinely sociopathic streak that made him irredeemably unlikable. His willingness to exploit and harm others for personal gain became a recurring theme that alienated viewers who had once rooted for him. Chris's artistic talents offered glimpses of potential depth, but the writers consistently chose to ignore these opportunities in favor of cheap, gross-out humor. Instead of developing his creative side, they reduced him to a walking masturbation joke, with no growth, no development, and no apparent purpose beyond making audiences uncomfortable. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we find Adam West, the delightfully unhinged mayor of Quahog. West represents everything wonderful about Family Guy's absurdist humor. His complete disconnection from reality, combined with his earnest delivery of utterly ridiculous statements, creates comedy gold that never feels forced or artificial. What makes Mayor West so beloved is his authentic insanity. Unlike other characters whose crazy behavior feels calculated or mean-spirited, West's lunacy comes from a place of genuine confusion about how the world works. His attempts to gain superpowers by visiting toxic waste dumps or his confusion about basic concepts like public transportation create moments of pure comedic brilliance. The beauty of Adam West lies in his unpredictability. You never know what bizarre tangent his mind will take next, but you can be certain it will be hilarious. His complete lack of self-awareness, combined with his position of authority, creates endless opportunities for absurd situations that showcase the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense in service of comedy. West's corruption stems not from malice or greed, but from his fundamental inability to understand basic concepts. This makes him simultaneously dangerous and endearing, a combination that few characters can pull off successfully. His random policy decisions and bizarre public appearances never fail to entertain, making him a consistent bright spot in the series. Bonnie Swanson presents a more complex case study in character likability. While Joe represents the best of humanity despite his physical challenges, Bonnie embodies frustration and resentment that many viewers find insufferable. Her constant complaints about her marriage feel particularly grating given her apparent unwillingness to actually address her supposed problems. Bonnie's role as the perpetual martyr becomes tiresome quickly. She acts as though caring for Joe is some unbearable burden, despite the fact that their relationship appears mutually beneficial. Her dependency on him contradicts her complaints about him, creating a character who seems more interested in generating sympathy than actually improving her situation. Her parenting, or lack thereof, presents another source of frustration. Bonnie shows minimal interest in her children, appearing detached and disengaged from their lives. This emotional distance, combined with her holier-than-thou attitude, creates a character who feels hypocritical and unlikable. Her affair with Brian further emphasizes her lack of respect for Joe, despite his obvious devotion to their family. The contrast between Bonnie and Joe highlights why Joe remains beloved, while Bonnie generates irritation. Joe faces genuine challenges with grace and humor, while Bonnie creates drama from relatively minor inconveniences. Her constant negativity and victim mentality make her one of the show's least sympathetic characters. Meg Griffin occupies a unique position in the Family Guy universe as the ultimate underdog. Her status as the family scapegoat has created an interesting dynamic where her suffering becomes a source of both comedy and sympathy. Many fans find themselves rooting for Meg precisely because she endures so much abuse from those around her. What makes Meg's character work is the exaggerated nature of her mistreatment. The abuse is so over-the-top and ridiculous that it loops back into comedy territory. Her family's treatment of her is so absurdly unfair that it becomes funny rather than genuinely disturbing. This delicate balance allows viewers to laugh at her situation while still feeling sympathy for her plight. Meg's occasional moments of strength and rebellion provide satisfying payoffs for viewers who have watched her suffer. When she finally stands up to her family or demonstrates hidden talents, these scenes feel earned and gratifying. Her brief stint in prison, where she became tough and confident, showed glimpses of what she could be if freed from her family's oppression. The character's potential remains largely untapped, which adds to her appeal. Meg possesses intelligence, artistic ability, and hidden depths that rarely get explored. This untapped potential makes her feel more human and relatable than many of her more cartoonish family members. Her moments of genuine emotion and vulnerability create connections with viewers who see themselves in her struggles. Doug represents everything wrong with Family Guy's approach to rivalry characters. Introduced as Stewie's nemesis, Doug never lived up to his intended role as a worthy adversary. Instead, he became a repetitive annoyance that frustrated both Stewie and the audience. His upper-class smugness and apparent invincibility made him feel like a cheap plot device rather than a genuine character. The fundamental problem with Doug was his lack of interesting qualities. He wasn't clever enough to match Stewie intellectually, funny enough to be entertaining, or threatening enough to feel dangerous. He was simply there, taking up screen time that could have been better used developing existing characters or introducing more compelling new ones. Stewie's inability to defeat Doug felt wrong for his character. The genius baby who builds time machines and death rays should not be consistently outsmarted by a slightly privileged toddler. This dynamic undermined Stewie's established competence and made their conflicts feel artificial and frustrating. The writer's decision to unceremoniously kill Doug off-screen felt like an admission of failure. Rather than providing closure to his storylines or giving him a memorable exit, they simply erased him from the show, leaving viewers with no payoff for the time they had invested in his conflicts with Stewie. Carter Pewterschmidt succeeds where Doug fails by embracing his role as an entertaining antagonist. As Lois's father and Peter's nemesis, Carter embodies every negative stereotype about wealthy elites while remaining genuinely funny. His complete disconnection from normal life, combined with his ruthless business practices, creates a character who is simultaneously despicable and hilarious. Carter's disdain for Peter provides some of the show's best ongoing comedy. His barely concealed contempt for his son-in-law, combined with his obvious belief that Lois deserves better, creates tension that translates into laughs. The fact that he's not entirely wrong about Peter's shortcomings adds depth to their antagonistic relationship. What makes Carter entertaining, rather than annoying, is his honesty about his awfulness. He never pretends to be a good person or tries to justify his selfish behavior. His brutal honesty about his motivations and his complete lack of self-awareness create comedy that feels authentic to his character. He knows exactly what he likes and uses his wealth to get it. Consequences be damned. Carter's capitalism, taken to absurd extremes, provides commentary on wealth inequality while remaining funny. His casual dismissal of poor people's problems and his genuine confusion about how normal people live create moments that are both satirical and comedic. He represents everything wrong with the ultra-wealthy, while being entertaining enough that viewers enjoy watching him. Herbert the Pervert represents one of Family Guy's most controversial characters. While some viewers find his antics mildly amusing, many fans consider him genuinely disturbing rather than funny. His entire character revolves around inappropriate behavior toward children, which crosses lines that many viewers find uncomfortable. The problem with Herbert lies in his one-note nature. Unlike other problematic characters who possess redeeming qualities or interesting depths, Herbert exists solely to make inappropriate jokes about children. This limited scope makes him feel more like a running gag that has overstayed its welcome rather than a fully developed character. Herbert's voice and mannerisms, while distinctive, quickly become grating rather than endearing. His appearances often feel forced, as though the writers are including him simply because he exists rather than because he serves any narrative purpose. This makes his scenes feel like interruptions rather than integral parts of episodes. The character's uncomfortable implications make many viewers question whether his inclusion is worth the potential laughs. While Family Guy has always pushed boundaries, Herbert's particular brand of humor feels more creepy than clever, leading many fans to wish he would simply disappear from the show entirely. Quagmire presents one of the most complex cases in Family Guy character analysis. His status as a perverted neighbor should make him completely unlikable, yet he maintains a dedicated fan base who appreciate his role in the show's dynamic. His relationships with women are deeply problematic, but his character possesses enough depth and humor to keep many viewers entertained. What saves Quagmire from complete condemnation is his occasional display of genuine care and loyalty. His protection of his sister Brenda and his willingness to stand up to her abusive boyfriend showed a side of him that transcended his usual selfish behavior. These moments of heroism provide glimpses of decency beneath his problematic exterior. Quagmire's rivalry with Brian offers some of the series' most memorable confrontations. His brutal takedown of Brian's hypocrisy during their dinner argument became an instant classic moment that many fans still quote. His ability to see through Brian's pretentious facade and call him out directly resonated with viewers who had grown tired of Brian's self-righteousness. The character's backstory adds layers that make him more than just a one-dimensional pervert. His complicated relationship with his father Ida and his genuine care for his cats reveal aspects of his personality that contradict his surface-level characterization. These contradictions make him feel more human and complex than many other characters. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the most dramatic fall from grace in Family Guy history. Once beloved as the voice of reason and moral center of the Griffin family, Brian has transformed into one of the show's most insufferable characters. His evolution from lovable family pet to pretentious hypocrite has alienated many longtime fans. Early Brian possessed integrity and intelligence that made him a compelling character. His refusal to cheat on exams and his genuine concern for his family's well-being established him as someone worth rooting for. However, as seasons progressed, his worst traits became more pronounced, while his positive qualities faded into memory. Brian's literary pretensions have become a source of endless frustration for viewers. His constant references to his unfinished novel and his pseudo-intellectual posturing feel tired and repetitive. His tendency to break up with women for being smarter than him reveals the shallow nature of his supposed intellectualism. The character's selfishness has reached levels that make him genuinely unlikable. His refusal to wear a flea collar despite infesting his entire family, his exploitation of Stewie's kindness, and his terrible treatment of his son Dylan paint a picture of someone who cares only about himself. His death and subsequent resurrection felt like missed opportunities to either give him meaningful character growth or replace him permanently. Brian's romantic relationships showcase his hypocrisy most clearly. He complains about only dating unintelligent women while actively seeking out such relationships. His inability to maintain connections with educated, accomplished women reveals his own insecurities and shallow nature. His treatment of women ranges from dismissive to actively harmful. Stewie Griffin stands as Family Guy's greatest character success story. His evolution from one-dimensional evil baby to complex, witty, and emotionally engaging character represents the best of what the show can achieve when it focuses on character development. His journey from would-be world conqueror to beloved family member has been genuinely compelling to watch. What makes Stewie so endearing is his combination of childish wonder and adult sophistication. His advanced vocabulary and complex schemes contrast beautifully with his genuine need for love and acceptance. This duality creates comedy that feels both intelligent and heartfelt, a rare combination in the Family Guy universe. Stewie's relationship with Brian, despite Brian's recent character deterioration, has provided some of the series' most memorable and touching moments. Their adventures together showcase both characters at their best, with Stewie's loyalty and Brian's companionship creating genuine emotional connections. Stewie's efforts to save Brian's life demonstrated the depth of their bond. The character's growth from villain to anti-hero to beloved family member has felt natural and earned. His evil schemes have become more playful than threatening, while his capacity for kindness and loyalty has expanded. His interactions with Rupert reveal his childlike side, while his inventions showcase his genius-level intellect. Stewie's humor has evolved to become more sophisticated and character-driven, rather than relying solely on shock value. His sarcastic observations and witty comebacks feel authentic to his personality while providing consistent laughs. His ability to break the fourth wall and comment on the show itself adds meta-humor that longtime fans appreciate. Lois Griffin presents a fascinating case study in character likability, or rather, the lack thereof. While she appears to be the moral center of the Griffin family, closer examination reveals her to be just as flawed and problematic as the relatives she criticizes. Her hypocrisy and manipulative behavior have made her increasingly unpopular with fans over time. Lois's biggest problem is her tendency to present herself as morally superior while engaging in behavior that contradicts her stated values. She criticizes others for infidelity while having multiple affairs. Herself, she plays the concerned mother while neglecting her children's actual needs. This disconnect between her self-image and her actions creates a character who feels dishonest and frustrating. Her treatment of Meg represents some of her worst behavior. While Peter's abuse of Meg is overt and cartoonish, Lois's neglect and emotional manipulation feel more realistic and therefore more disturbing. Her tendency to gaslight Meg and play the victim when confronted about her parenting failures reveals a calculating side to her personality. Lois's violent tendencies, particularly after learning martial arts, showcase her capacity for genuine cruelty. Her attacks on innocent people and her aggressive behavior toward service workers reveal someone with serious anger management issues. The fact that she blames Peter for her violent outbursts demonstrates her unwillingness to take responsibility for her own actions. Her relationship with Peter, while central to the show, often feels more like mutual exploitation than genuine love. Both characters use each other for their own purposes, with Lois frequently manipulating Peter's stupidity to get her way. This dynamic makes their marriage feel hollow and transactional, rather than romantic or meaningful. Dr. Hartman provides comic relief through his spectacular medical incompetence. His complete cluelessness about basic medical procedures creates absurd situations that highlight the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense for comedic effect. His survival in his profession defies all logic, which makes him perfect for Family Guy's reality. What makes Dr. Hartman endearing despite his obvious malpractice is his earnest delivery of completely wrong information. He never seems aware of his incompetence, approaching each medical crisis with unwarranted confidence. This combination of ignorance and enthusiasm creates comedy that feels lighthearted rather than mean-spirited. His interactions with patients and their families provide opportunities for misunderstandings that showcase the show's love of absurdist humor. His tendency to deliver completely irrelevant information with the same seriousness as actual medical advice creates confusion that translates into laughs. Dr. Hartman's continued employment at Quahog Hospital raises questions about the town's medical oversight, but viewers have learned to embrace such logical inconsistencies as part of Family Guy's charm. His presence provides reliable comedy without requiring complex character development or emotional investment. Peter Griffin occupies the uncomfortable position of being both the show's protagonist and arguably its most hateable character. His journey from lovable oaf to genuinely problematic individual has paralleled many fans' growing frustration with the series' direction. His behavior has become increasingly cruel and selfish, making him difficult to root for or even tolerate. Peter's treatment of his family represents his worst qualities. His abuse of Meg goes far beyond typical sibling rivalry or parental discipline, crossing into territory that feels genuinely disturbing. His physical violence toward his children and wife, while played for laughs, creates uncomfortable viewing for many fans. His friendship with Joe, Cleveland, and Quagmire often brings out his most selfish instincts. His encouragement of Joe's infidelity and his general disregard for his friend's well-being shows someone who views relationships as sources of entertainment rather than genuine connections. His inability to support others during difficult times reveals his fundamental self-centeredness. Peter's lack of growth or learning represents one of the show's biggest weaknesses. Despite facing consequences for his actions, he never develops genuine understanding or changes his behavior patterns. This static character development makes him feel less like a person and more like a collection of negative traits, designed to drive plot points. His role as father figure is particularly problematic, as his children are forced to navigate their development despite, rather than because, of his influence. His failure to provide guidance, support, or even basic safety for his family makes him one of television's worst fictional parents. The evolution of these characters reflects Family Guy's own journey as a series. Early seasons balanced outrageous humor with genuine character moments that made viewers care about these flawed individuals. As time progressed, the show's emphasis shifted toward shock value and repetitive gags at the expense of character development. Some characters, like Stewie and Joe, have maintained their appeal through consistent characterization and occasional growth. Others, like Brian and Chris, have suffered from writers who seemed more interested in exploiting their worst traits than exploring their potential for development. Still, others, like Peter and Lois, have become any increasingly unlikable as their negative qualities have been amplified without corresponding positive growth. The most beloved Family Guy characters tend to possess self-awareness about their flaws or demonstrate genuine care for others despite their problems. Joe's kindness, Stewie's loyalty, and even Carter's honesty about his selfishness make them more palatable than characters who lack these redeeming qualities. Conversely, the most hated characters often combine terrible behavior with hypocrisy or complete lack of self-reflection. Brian's pretentiousness, Lois's manipulation, and Peter's cruelty become harder to tolerate when the characters themselves seem unaware of or indifferent to their impact on others. The show's treatment of these characters also influences fan perception. Characters who face consequences for their actions or show occasional vulnerability tend to maintain viewer sympathy longer than those who seem invulnerable to the effects of their behavior. The Parenter. Writers' willingness to explore character depths versus relying on surface-level gags often determines whether characters remain fresh or become stale. Family Guy's character dynamics work best when they balance outrageous behavior with moments of genuine humanity. The show's finest episodes often feature characters stepping outside their established roles to reveal hidden depths or unexpected kindness. These moments remind viewers why they became invested in these characters originally. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider how these complex personalities have evolved over more than 20 years of television. Some have grown into beloved icons of animated comedy, while others have become cautionary tales about the importance of character development and consistency. The residents of Quahog continue to entertain, frustrate, and surprise audiences with their unpredictable antics. Whether you love them or hate them, these characters have become integral parts of popular culture, inspiring countless discussions, debates, and analyses like this one. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious sort through the chaos of Family Guy's character landscape as peacefully as possible. Tomorrow brings new episodes, new controversies, and new opportunities to debate the merits and flaws of Seth MacFarlane's animated creation. Ready to drift into the wonderfully chaotic world of Quahog? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most bizarre, hilarious, and oddly comforting Family Guy facts that'll have you sleeping soundly while laughing internally. From the Griffin family's darkest secrets to the most obscure trivia that even die-hard fans might miss, this is your ultimate bedtime companion for all things Family Guy. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin wasn't always meant to be the bumbling patriarch we know and love. The original concept had him as a more competent character, but as the show evolved, his stupidity became his defining trait. What's fascinating is how this intellectual decline actually mirrors real-world studies showing that prolonged exposure to certain environments can affect cognitive function. Peter's workplace at the brewery, his constant drinking, and his circle of equally dim friends created the perfect storm for his legendary ignorance. Speaking of Peter's proud intelligence, did you know his IQ has been tested multiple times throughout the series? While never explicitly stated, various episodes hint that it hovers somewhere between a goldfish and a particularly slow houseplant. The writers deliberately keep it vague because, as creator Seth MacFarlane once mentioned in interviews, giving Peter a specific IQ would limit the comedic possibilities. Sometimes he needs to be smart enough to operate heavy machinery. Other times he can't figure out how doorknobs work. The Griffin house itself holds secrets that most viewers never notice. The layout has mysteriously changed dozens of times throughout the series, with rooms appearing and disappearing like they're part of some supernatural phenomenon. The basement alone has been everything from a simple storage space to an elaborate laboratory, a nightclub, and even home to Peter's secret basement family. This isn't just inconsistent animation, it's actually become a running gag among the production team, who deliberately shift the house's internal geography to mess with detail-oriented fans. Here's something that'll make you appreciate Stewie even more. His distinctive British accent wasn't originally planned. Seth MacFarlane was experimenting with different voices during early development, and the posh British accent was meant to be temporary. However, when they recorded the first few episodes, the contrast between this sophisticated voice coming from a baby was so hilarious that they kept it. The accent also serves a deeper purpose. representing Stewie's intellectual superiority over his family, while simultaneously making his evil plots seem more theatrical than genuinely threatening. Brian Griffin represents one of television's most complex characters when you really think about it. He's an atheist in a predominantly Christian household, a failed writer in a family that doesn't value intellectual pursuits, and an alcoholic struggling with depression while maintaining a facade of being the voice of reason. The writers have used Brian to explore serious topics like addiction, mental health, and existential crisis, all while keeping the show fundamentally comedic. His relationship with Stewie works so well because they're both outsiders in their own family, bonded by their shared sense of not quite belonging. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically since its debut, but one thing that's remained consistent is the deliberate simplicity of character designs. This wasn't just a budget consideration. It was an artistic choice that allows for more fluid animation during the show's famous action sequences. Those epic Peter versus giant chicken fights require characters that can be drawn quickly and consistently by multiple animators, which is why everyone has such distinctive, simple silhouettes. Cleveland's departure and return to the show created one of the most interesting character arcs in animated television. When he left for his own spin-off, the writers had to figure out how to maintain the dynamic of Peter's friend group. Joe and Quagmire's personalities were subtly adjusted to fill the void Cleveland left behind. When Cleveland returned after his show was canceled, he was noticeably different, more cynical, and world-weary, reflecting both the character's experiences and perhaps the writer's own feelings about the failed spin-off. The show's time travel episodes aren't just random comedy. They're actually carefully constructed to avoid major paradoxes while still allowing for maximum chaos. Stewie's time machine has specific rules that the writers follow consistently, even when it's not explicitly stated. Time travelers can't prevent their own birth. Major historical events have a way of correcting themselves, and actions in the past create ripple effects rather than complete timeline rewrites. This attention to detail in such a seemingly chaotic show demonstrates the sophisticated writing behind the surface-level humor. Meg's treatment by her family has sparked countless discussions about bullying and family dynamics. What's interesting is that the writers have admitted they sometimes feel guilty about how harshly Meg is treated, leading to occasional episodes where she gets small victories or moments of genuine family connection. These episodes often perform better with audiences, suggesting that viewers appreciate depth even in characters who primarily exist for comic relief. The show's use of cutaway gags serves a purpose beyond just random humor. These flashbacks and fantasy sequences allow the writers to explore scenarios that would be impossible within the show's normal continuity. They're also used strategically to control pacing, breaking up dialogue-heavy scenes or extending episodes that might otherwise run short. Some of the most memorable Family Guy moments come from these seemingly throwaway gags, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes from complete non sequiturs. Lois Griffin's character represents an interesting study in maternal archetypes. She's simultaneously the long-suffering wife, the voice of reason, and occasionally the instigator of chaos. Her wealthy background provides constant opportunities for class-based humor, while her decision to marry Peter creates natural conflict with her family. The writers have explored her character depth through various episodes, showing her capacity for both nurturing and destruction, making her far more complex than the typical animated housewife. The show's musical numbers aren't just entertainment. They serve specific narrative functions. Songs are used to advance plot, develop character relationships, and provide emotional beats that straight dialogue might not achieve. The production team includes talented musicians who ensure these sequences feel authentic rather than forced. Some episodes are structured entirely around musical numbers, creating mini operettas within the traditional sitcom format. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has created some of the show's most creative moments. When standards and practices reject certain content, the writers often find more clever ways to address the same topics. This has led to some surprisingly sophisticated social commentary disguised as silly cartoon humor. The show's late-night time slot allows for more adult content, but the writers still push boundaries in ways that require careful navigation of network policies. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unique in animation. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, often having conversations with himself that require precise timing and distinct vocal characterizations. Recording sessions involve complex choreography as he switches between Peter, Brian, and Stewie, sometimes within single scenes. Other voice actors have adapted to this rhythm, creating an ensemble performance style that's rare in animation. The show's treatment of death and resurrection has become increasingly casual over the years. Characters have died and returned so often that mortality has lost much of its dramatic weight. This reflects both the show's cartoon logic and its approach to consequences. Actions that would be traumatic in real life become temporary inconveniences in the Family Guy universe, allowing for more extreme comedy without lasting emotional impact. Product placement and corporate references in Family Guy often serve dual purposes. While they sometimes represent genuine sponsorship deals, they're more often used for satirical commentary on consumer culture. The show frequently mocks the very brands it features, creating a complex relationship between commercial interests and creative expression. This balancing act reflects broader tensions in modern television production. The show's international versions reveal interesting cultural adaptations. Different countries handle the humor differently, sometimes replacing American-specific references with local equivalents. These translations offer insight into how comedy translates across cultural boundaries and what elements of Family Guy appeal to global audiences versus American-specific humor. Background characters in Family Guy often have surprisingly detailed backstories that never make it into episodes. The writers develop full histories for even minor characters, creating a rich fictional universe that extends beyond what viewers see. This attention to detail helps maintain consistency and provides material for potential future storylines, even if most of this information never becomes canonical. The show's handling of controversial topics has evolved significantly since its early seasons. What began as relatively straightforward shock humor has developed into more nuanced social commentary, though it still maintains its irreverent tone. The writers have learned to balance pushing boundaries with responsible storytelling, creating content that generates discussion rather than just controversy. Seth MacFarlane's musical background significantly influences the show's comedy style. His training in musical theater brings a sense of timing and rhythm to dialogue that's unusual in animated comedy. This musical sensibility affects everything from joke delivery to episode pacing, creating a unique comedic rhythm that distinguishes Family Guy from other animated series. The show's science fiction elements, particularly Stewie's inventions, follow surprisingly consistent internal logic. Time machines, mind control devices, and other fantastic technologies operate according to established rules within the show's universe. This consistency allows for complex storylines that span multiple episodes while maintaining the suspension of disbelief necessary for science fiction comedy. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond simple memes. The show's rapid-fire reference style and cutaway structure mirror how information is consumed online, creating a feedback loop between the show and digital culture. Clips and quotes circulate independently of full episodes, creating new contexts and meanings for the show's content. The production schedule for Family Guy requires incredible coordination between writers, animators, voice actors, and musicians. Each episode involves hundreds of people working across multiple disciplines and locations. The complexity of this process is invisible to viewers, but represents a significant logistical achievement that enables the show's consistent quality and unique style. Character relationship dynamics in Family Guy follow specific patterns that create comedy through repetition and variation. Peter and Chicken's fights, Brian and Stewie's adventures, and Meg's rejection by her family operate like musical themes, with each iteration building on previous versions while introducing new elements. This structural approach to character interaction creates familiarity while maintaining surprise. The show's approach to aging is particularly interesting in animation. Characters remain physically the same while their experiences accumulate, creating personalities that develop without visual change. This allows for long-term character growth while maintaining the visual consistency that animation requires. The writers must balance character development with the static nature of animated characters. Family Guy's educational content is often hidden within comedy. Historical references, scientific concepts, and cultural knowledge are embedded in jokes and storylines, creating opportunities for learning disguised as entertainment. Viewers often gain information about topics they might not otherwise encounter, making the show inadvertently educational despite its primary focus on humor. The show's production team includes specialists in various fields who ensure accuracy in specialized content, medical procedures, legal situations, and technical details are researched to maintain believability even within the show's exaggerated reality. This attention to detail supports the show's ability to tackle complex topics while maintaining its comedic tone. Sound design in Family Guy extends beyond dialogue and music to create a rich auditory landscape. Background sounds, sound effects, and ambient noise contribute to the show's atmosphere and comedic timing. The production team uses audio to enhance visual gags and create emotional responses that support the storytelling. The show's merchandising strategy reflects its cultural impact and commercial success. Products range from simple apparel to complex collectibles, creating multiple revenue streams that support continued production. The variety of merchandise also demonstrates the show's broad appeal across different demographic groups and age ranges. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is evident in the proliferation of adult-oriented animated comedy. The show's success paved the way for numerous imitators and inspired shows that push boundaries in different directions. This influence extends beyond animation to live-action comedy, creating a lasting impact on television humor. As we drift toward sleep, remember that Family Guy represents more than just animated comedy. It's a cultural phenomenon that reflects our society's humor, values, and contradictions. The Griffin family's chaos mirrors our own family dynamics. Their struggles echo our personal challenges, and their resilience reminds us that laughter can overcome almost anything. Whether you're dreaming of time travel adventures with Stewie, epic battles between Peter and a giant chicken, or simply the comfort of familiar voices telling familiar jokes, Family Guy continues to provide entertainment that's both sophisticated and silly, meaningful and meaningless, just like life itself. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into another ridiculous situation that'll make you laugh tomorrow.
Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite animated comedy? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wild world of Family Guy with facts so fascinating they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. From secret voice acting techniques to hidden Easter eggs that took fans decades to discover, these are the Family Guy facts that will blow your mind. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young animator named Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped office, sketching what would become one of television's most controversial and beloved families. Little did he know that his creation would survive cancellation twice, spark international debates, and become a cultural phenomenon that would define comedy for generations. But here's the thing. The story of Family Guy is far more incredible than anything Peter Griffin could ever dream up. Let's start with something that will immediately grab your attention. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox? The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Network executives thought the show was too edgy, too controversial, and frankly, too weird for mainstream television. They were wrong, dead wrong. The show's popularity on Adult Swim and DVD sales were so massive that Fox had no choice but to bring it back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007. But once again, fan outcry and incredible ratings forced the network to reverse their decision. This makes Family Guy one of the only shows in television history to be resurrected twice by pure fan power. Here's where things get really interesting. Seth MacFarlane, the creative genius behind the show, almost wasn't around to see his creation succeed. On September 11, 2001, MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11. Yes, that Flight 11. He was scheduled to fly from Boston to Los Angeles that morning, but a combination of a hangover and his travel agent giving him the wrong departure time caused him to miss the flight by just 10 minutes. That flight crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. If not for that hangover and scheduling mix-up, there might never have been a Family Guy renaissance, no American Dad, no The Orville. The entire landscape of modern animation could have been completely different. Now, let's talk about voices, because this is where Family Guy becomes absolutely mind-blowing. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just create the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewter Schmidt. That's 6 major characters, each with completely distinct personalities and vocal patterns. But here's the kicker. He does all of these voices live, in real time, often switching between characters mid-sentence during recording sessions. The other voice actors have described watching MacFarlane work as like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder, except it's all controlled and brilliant. Speaking of Stewie, let's address the elephant in the room. For years, fans debated whether Stewie was gay, straight, or something else entirely. Seth MacFarlane finally settled this debate in a way that's both hilarious and profound. According to MacFarlane, Stewie's sexuality is intentionally fluid and undefined because he's a baby. Babies don't have developed sexual identities. The joke isn't about his orientation. It's about the absurdity of a 1-year-old having any romantic inclinations at all. This clever writing choice allows the character to be whatever the story needs him to be, making him one of the most versatile characters in television comedy. Here's a fact that will make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single cutaway gag in Family Guy is hand-drawn and animated, even the ones that last only 3 seconds. The animation team creates full character models, backgrounds, and even choreography for jokes that might get a 2-second laugh. This dedication to craft is why Family Guy's visual comedy feels so rich and detailed compared to other animated shows that rely on cheaper animation shortcuts. The show's controversial reputation isn't accidental. It's carefully calculated. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that many of the most outrageous jokes are specifically designed to distract from the show's more subtle social commentary. While audiences are debating whether a particular gag went too far, they're absorbing deeper messages about American culture, politics, and society. It's comedy as intellectual sleight of hand, and it works brilliantly. Let's dive into some character origins that will surprise you. Brian Griffin, the intellectual family dog, was originally going to be just a regular pet with no speaking lines. MacFarlane added Brian's voice and personality during the pilot episode because he felt the family needed a voice of reason, someone who could call out Peter's ridiculous behavior while still being part of the family dynamic. The character became so integral that many episodes are built entirely around Brian's storylines. Here's something that might change how you watch the show forever. The Griffin family's house layout has been deliberately inconsistent throughout the series. Sometimes there are different numbers of rooms, staircases appear and disappear, and the kitchen changes size depending on what the scene requires. This isn't sloppy animation. It's an intentional choice. MacFarlane wanted the house to feel like a cartoon space where anything could happen, rather than a realistic location that would limit storytelling possibilities. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally supposed to become a recurring gag. The first chicken fight was written as a one-off joke for a single episode. However, the animation team had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept finding excuses to bring it back. These sequences now take weeks to animate and are some of the most expensive scenes the show produces. But they've become so beloved by fans that the network happily approves the budget every time. Let's talk about the show's relationship with censorship, because it's more complex than you might think. Family Guy has actually been censored differently in various countries, creating unique versions of episodes around the world. In some regions, entire storylines are removed or altered. This has created a strange phenomenon where hardcore fans collect different international versions of episodes to see how the same jokes are handled in different cultural contexts. It's like a global experiment in comedy and censorship. Here's a technical fact that showcases the show's evolution. Early Family Guy episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show gradually transitioned to digital animation. However, they maintained the hand-drawn look by using digital tools that mimic traditional animation methods. This hybrid approach gives Family Guy its distinctive visual style that looks both modern and classically animated. The writing process for Family Guy is unlike any other television show. The writer's room operates more like a comedy club than a traditional TV writing environment. Writers pitch jokes constantly, and the best ones get integrated into episodes regardless of whether they fit the main storyline. This is why the show's cutaway gags often feel so random and disconnected. They literally are random jokes that were too funny not to use. Speaking of cutaway gags, there's actually a complex system for categorizing them. The writers have developed an internal rating system for gags based on how offensive, surreal, or topical they are. This helps them balance episodes so that viewers get a mix of different comedy styles. Too many surreal gags in a row can lose audiences, while too many topical jokes can date an episode quickly. Here's something that will make you appreciate the voice acting even more. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, originally auditioned for a completely different character. She was supposed to voice a minor recurring character, but her chemistry with Seth MacFarlane during the audition was so strong that they rewrote Lois's personality to match Borstein's natural comedic instincts. This collaborative approach to character development is why the Griffin family feels so authentic despite being completely absurd. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond television. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture, political discourse, and even academic studies on contemporary humor. Universities now offer courses that analyze Family Guy episodes as examples of postmodern comedy and cultural commentary. The show that was once considered too lowbrow for television is now being studied by scholars as a significant cultural artifact. Let's explore the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that simply hire celebrities to play themselves, Family Guy often asks famous people to voice completely different characters. This approach has led to some surprising performances where you might not even recognize the celebrity's voice. The casting directors specifically look for celebrities who can disappear into their roles rather than just showing up to be famous. Here's a behind-the-scenes fact about the show's music. Every song in Family Guy, from the opening theme to the elaborate musical numbers, is composed and performed by professional musicians. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, personally oversees the musical aspects of the show. The orchestra recordings are done with full ensembles, giving the show's music a richness that most animated comedies can't match. The show's approach to social issues is more sophisticated than critics often acknowledge. Family Guy frequently tackles controversial topics, but the show's official stance is usually revealed through Brian's character, who serves as the moral compass. When Peter does something outrageous, Brian's reaction often represents the show's actual position on the issue. This allows the show to explore controversial territory while maintaining a clear ethical framework. Here's something that might surprise casual viewers. Family Guy has actually won several prestigious awards, including Emmy nominations and Annie Awards for animation excellence. The show's reputation for controversy sometimes overshadows its technical and artistic achievements, but industry professionals consistently recognize the quality of its writing, animation, and voice acting. The international success of Family Guy has led to some fascinating cultural adaptations. In some countries, local writers create original cutaway gags that reference local culture and politics while maintaining the show's overall style. These regional variations have become collector's items for international fans who want to see how different cultures interpret the Family Guy format. Let's discuss the show's relationship with its own continuity. Family Guy deliberately ignores its own timeline and character development, treating each episode as a standalone story. Characters die and come back to life. Major life events are forgotten, and personality traits change based on what's funny for individual episodes. This approach was revolutionary in television comedy and has influenced countless other shows. The animation style of Family Guy was specifically designed to be cost-effective while maintaining quality. The character designs use simple shapes and limited color palettes, which makes animation faster and cheaper. However, the show compensates for this simplicity with incredibly detailed backgrounds and elaborate action sequences. This balance between efficiency and spectacle is part of what makes the show economically sustainable. Here's a fact about the show's writing timeline that might surprise you. Family Guy episodes are often written months or even years before they air, which means the writers have to predict which topics will still be relevant by broadcast time. This has led to some episodes that feel incredibly timely and others that reference events or celebrities that are no longer culturally significant. The writers have learned to focus on timeless themes and universal human experiences that will remain funny regardless of when the episode airs. The show's approach to parody is methodical and research-intensive. When Family Guy decides to parody a movie, television show, or cultural phenomenon, the writers study the source material extensively. They watch movies multiple times, read reviews and analyses, and even interview people involved in the original productions. This thorough research is why Family Guy parodies often capture subtle details that casual viewers of the original material might miss. Speaking of parodies, let's talk about the show's relationship with other animated comedies. Family Guy exists in a strange competitive space with shows like The Simpsons and South Park. Rather than avoiding comparisons, the show has embraced them, creating episodes that directly reference and interact with these other shows. This meta approach to animated comedy has created a shared universe of sorts where different animated families acknowledge each other's existence. The voice recording process for Family Guy is surprisingly collaborative. While Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, the other actors often improvise and ad-lib during recording sessions. Many of the funniest moments in episodes come from spontaneous interactions between voice actors that weren't in the original script. The show's editors then work to integrate these improvised moments into the final episodes. Here's something that showcases the show's attention to detail. Family Guy maintains detailed character backstories and family histories that extend far beyond what's shown in episodes. The writers have created extensive biographies for each character, including childhood experiences, educational backgrounds, and psychological profiles. This hidden depth informs how characters react to different situations, even in seemingly random cutaway gags. The show's international broadcast has created some unique censorship challenges. Different countries have different standards for what can be shown on television, which means episodes are edited differently around the world. Some countries remove entire storylines, while others simply bleep out specific words or blur certain images. This has created a fascinating study in how different cultures approach comedy and censorship. Family Guy's influence on internet culture cannot be overstated. The show's rapid-fire joke style and quotable dialogue have made it perfect for meme culture. Countless Family Guy moments have become viral internet content, often introducing the show to audiences who have never watched full episodes. This digital second life has helped maintain the show's cultural relevance across different generations. The animation team for Family Guy includes artists from around the world, creating a truly international production. Animators in different countries work on different aspects of each episode, with sophisticated coordination systems ensuring consistency across the global production pipeline. This international approach brings diverse artistic perspectives to the show while maintaining its distinctive American humor. Let's talk about the show's relationship with its own merchandise. Family Guy products range from traditional items like t-shirts and toys to unusual collaborations with high-end fashion brands and gourmet food companies. The show's irreverent attitude extends to its commercial partnerships, often resulting in products that are as surprising and unconventional as the show itself. The show's approach to holiday episodes demonstrates its sophisticated understanding of audience expectations. Rather than creating simple seasonal content, Family Guy holiday episodes often subvert traditional holiday tropes while still delivering the emotional satisfaction that viewers expect from seasonal television. This balance between cynicism and sentimentality is one of the show's most impressive achievements. Here's a final fact that brings everything full circle. Family Guy's survival and success represent more than just entertainment industry triumph. The show's journey from cancellation to cultural phenomenon demonstrates how modern media consumption has changed. In the pre-internet era, a canceled show stayed canceled. But Family Guy's resurrection through DVD sales, syndication, and streaming proved that audiences had more power than anyone realized. The show didn't just come back from the dead. It helped establish new models for how television shows can build and maintain audiences across multiple platforms and decades. As we wind down this journey through the fascinating world of Family Guy, remember that behind every outrageous joke and controversial moment is a team of artists, writers, and performers who have dedicated their careers to making people laugh. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has undeniably changed television comedy forever. From its near-death experiences to its current status as a cultural institution, the show proves that sometimes the most unlikely ideas become the most enduring successes. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, anything is possible, no matter how ridiculous it might seem. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy feels like a fever dream that somehow makes perfect sense? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, contradictory, and absolutely fascinating lore of one of television's most chaotic animated families. From timeline inconsistencies that would make Doctor Who writers jealous to character deaths that stick about as well as wet spaghetti on a wall, we're exploring every twisted corner of the Griffin universe. So grab your favorite blanket, settle in, and prepare for a journey through 20-plus years of animated madness that will either put you to sleep or keep you up all night questioning everything you thought you knew about Quahog. Let's start with something that will immediately make your brain hurt in the most soothing way possible. The Griffin family timeline is more tangled than Christmas lights that have been stored in your attic for 3 years. Peter Griffin has somehow managed to work at a toy factory, a brewery, and about 17 other jobs while maintaining the same age and living in the same house. His children have been attending high school for over 2 decades, which either makes them the worst students in Rhode Island or suggests that time moves differently in their universe. Consider this mind-bending fact that perfectly captures the show's relationship with continuity. In early seasons, Chris Griffin was clearly established as being 14 years old. Fast forward through hundreds of episodes, multiple presidential elections, and several major world events, and Chris is still somehow 14. The same applies to Meg, who has been stuck in her teenage nightmare for so long that she could probably qualify for some kind of Guinness World Record for longest adolescence in television history. But here's where it gets even more deliciously confusing. The show occasionally references real-world events that have happened during its run, suggesting that some time has passed in their universe. Characters mention current technology, reference recent movies, and sometimes even acknowledge that things have changed. Yet the core family dynamics, ages, and circumstances remain frozen in this perfect amber of animated time, where nothing truly progresses, but everything constantly evolves. This temporal flexibility isn't a bug in Family Guy's programming. It's actually one of its most genius features. By refusing to be bound by traditional continuity, the writers have created a sandbox where literally anything can happen. Peter can die and come back to life. The family can move to different locations and then inexplicably return home. Characters can have completely different backstories from episode to episode, and somehow it all just works within the show's internal logic. Speaking of death, let's talk about the most famous resurrection in Family Guy history, which reads like a bizarre fairy tale designed specifically for adults who need to process the concept of impermanence in the safest possible way. Brian Griffin, the intellectual dog who serves as the family's voice of reason when he's not being a pretentious writer stereotype, was killed off in what seemed like a permanent way. The internet collectively lost its mind, fans organized protests, and for a brief moment, it looked like the show had actually committed to a major permanent change. But then, in true Family Guy fashion, they brought him back through time travel shenanigans that made about as much sense as you'd expect. The whole arc became this perfect metaphor for how the show treats consequence and permanence. Nothing is ever truly gone. Nothing is ever truly permanent. But the emotional impact of these fake deaths still somehow manages to hit viewers right in the feelings. It's like a magic trick where you can see exactly how it's done, but still feel amazed when the rabbit appears. This approach to character mortality extends throughout the entire show's history. Characters have died, been resurrected, killed again, and come back so many times that death in the Family Guy universe feels more like a temporary inconvenience than an actual ending. It creates this weirdly comforting atmosphere where you never have to worry about permanent loss, because in this world, everything can be undone with enough creativity and complete disregard for logical consistency. Now let's drift into the geographical mysteries of Quahog, Rhode Island, a town that exists in a space that defies both physics and geography in ways that should probably concern the local authorities. According to various episodes, Quahog is simultaneously a small, close-knit community where everyone knows each other and a sprawling metropolis with enough infrastructure to support major television stations, multiple hospitals, and apparently an infinite number of bars for Peter to get kicked out of. The town's layout changes depending on what the episode requires, which creates this dreamlike quality where familiar locations can suddenly be in completely different places or have entirely new neighbors. The Griffin house sometimes has a backyard that extends for miles and sometimes appears to be crammed between other houses with barely enough room for a garbage can. It's like living inside a memory where the details shift and change based on what feels most important at any given moment. This geographical flexibility extends to the show's treatment of distance and travel time. Characters can walk to locations that should be hours apart, drive to places that exist in different states entirely, or somehow end up in foreign countries through a series of increasingly implausible coincidences. It creates this sense that the world of Family Guy operates on dream logic, where emotional distance matters more than physical distance, and where you can end up anywhere if the story needs you there. The town itself has a personality that shifts and changes like a living entity. Sometimes Quahog is presented as a typical New England community with normal problems and reasonable people. Other times, it's revealed to be home to the most bizarre collection of individuals ever assembled in one place, including but not limited to time travelers, aliens, talking animals, and people who seem to exist purely to serve as punchlines for increasingly elaborate jokes. Let's talk about the show's relationship with reality, which operates on multiple levels simultaneously in a way that would make philosophy professors weep with joy or frustration. Family Guy exists in a universe where talking babies, intellectually gifted dogs, and interdimensional travel are all perfectly normal and accepted parts of daily life. Yet somehow, the characters are constantly surprised by things that are far less remarkable than their everyday existence. Stewie Griffin, the family's infant mastermind, represents perhaps the most fascinating example of this reality-bending approach to storytelling. He's simultaneously a normal baby who requires diaper changes and feeding, and a genius inventor capable of creating time machines, death rays, and weather control devices. Other characters sometimes understand his advanced speech, and sometimes treat him like a normal baby, depending on what works best for the joke or story being told. This selective awareness extends throughout the entire cast and creates layers of reality that exist simultaneously without ever really contradicting each other. Brian is a dog who drives cars, drinks alcohol, and has complex romantic relationships with human women. Yet he also sometimes exhibits normal dog behaviors like chasing squirrels or getting excited about walks. The show never bothers to explain these contradictions because they don't need explanation in a universe where consistency is less important than entertainment value. The genius of this approach is that it mirrors how our own minds work when we're drifting off to sleep. In dreams, contradictory things can exist side by side without causing any distress. You can be simultaneously in your childhood home and your current apartment, talking to people who are both alive and dead, engaging in activities that make perfect sense within the dream context, but would be impossible in waking life. Family Guy captures this dream logic perfectly, creating a viewing experience that feels familiar and comforting even when it's completely absurd. Peter Griffin himself embodies this dream logic in human form. He somehow managed to maintain steady employment despite being fired from multiple jobs, sometimes in the same episode. His incompetence is legendary, yet he consistently stumbles into situations where his particular brand of chaos somehow saves the day, or at least doesn't cause permanent damage to anyone who matters. He's like the universe's way of proving that sometimes being completely unprepared for everything is actually the best preparation for anything. His relationship with his family operates on this same dream logic frequency. He clearly loves his wife and children, but he also regularly forgets their names, ignores their needs, and puts them in danger through his various schemes and misadventures. Yet somehow, these contradictions never destroy the family unit because love in the Family Guy universe is more about intention than action, more about showing up than being competent. The show's treatment of flashbacks and cutaway gags creates another layer of reality that exists parallel to the main narrative without ever quite intersecting with it in ways that make traditional sense. These segments often contradict established character histories or present completely different versions of events that supposedly happened in the same timeline. Rather than being confusing, these contradictions become part of the show's charm, like listening to someone tell you about their dreams, where all the details keep shifting but the emotional core remains consistent. Let's explore the mysterious depths of the show's pop culture obsession, which functions like a massive shared unconscious where every reference, parody, and homage exists simultaneously across multiple decades of entertainment history. Family Guy doesn't just reference popular culture, it exists inside it like a fish swimming through an ocean of collective memory. The show treats the entire history of television, movies, music, and celebrity culture as one enormous playground where everything is equally accessible and equally fair game for reinterpretation. This creates a viewing experience that feels like browsing through a vast library of cultural memories, where you might encounter references to obscure 1970s television shows alongside parodies of current internet memes. The temporal mixing of references contributes to the show's dreamlike quality, where past and present blur together in ways that feel natural within the context of the viewing experience, but would make no sense if you tried to map them chronologically. The character interactions within this cultural soup create their own form of logic that operates independently of real-world consistency. Characters can discuss events from different time periods, as if they all happened yesterday, reference movies that wouldn't exist in their established timeline, and demonstrate knowledge of cultural phenomena that should be completely outside their experience. Yet somehow, these anachronisms never feel jarring because they're delivered with such confidence and integration into the story flow. This approach to cultural reference creates a kind of comfort food for the brain, where familiar elements from your entertainment consumption history get mixed together in new combinations that feel both surprising and inevitable. It's like having someone remix your favorite songs in ways you never expected, but that somehow work perfectly for the mood you didn't know you were in. The show's relationship with its own history creates another fascinating layer of complexity that rewards long-term viewers while remaining accessible to newcomers. Jokes and storylines sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, creating this sense of continuity within the chaos. Characters will occasionally mention things that happened in previous seasons as if they actually matter to the ongoing narrative, even though the show regularly contradicts its own established facts. This selective continuity operates like a friendship where you share inside jokes and references that have built up over years of interaction, but you don't expect every conversation to reference everything that has ever happened between you. Some things matter, some things don't, and the distinction between what's important and what's forgettable shifts based on context and emotional relevance, rather than chronological significance. Family Guy's approach to emotional storytelling creates waves of feeling that wash over viewers in patterns designed to keep you engaged without overwhelming you with too much intensity. The show regularly shifts between completely absurd comedy and surprisingly touching moments of family connection, often within the same episode or even the same scene. This emotional rhythm mirrors the natural fluctuations of consciousness as you transition from waking awareness to sleep. The touching moments often come from unexpected sources and catch viewers off guard in ways that feel authentic despite occurring within completely artificial contexts. A conversation between Peter and his children might reveal genuine insight into parenting challenges, even though it takes place during a storyline involving time-traveling robots or interdimensional portals. These moments of sincerity exist alongside the absurdity without diminishing either aspect of the experience. The show's treatment of family dynamics operates on multiple emotional frequencies simultaneously. The Griffin family clearly cares about each other deeply, but they also regularly treat each other terribly in ways that would destroy real relationships. Yet somehow, the underlying love and commitment always reasserts itself when it really matters, creating this sense that no matter how chaotic or dysfunctional things get, the core connections remain solid. This emotional safety net allows viewers to enjoy the chaos without worrying about permanent damage to characters they've grown to care about. It's like watching a family of professional stunt performers who can survive any explosion or catastrophe because you know they're wearing invisible protective gear made of animated resilience and narrative necessity. The character of Lois Griffin represents perhaps the most complex emotional anchor in the show's universe. She's simultaneously the voice of reason and a participant in the chaos, capable of being both the responsible adult who keeps the family functioning and the enabler who allows Peter's schemes to continue destroying everything around them. Her character embodies the show's approach to moral complexity, where people can be simultaneously good and bad, smart and foolish, loving and selfish, without these contradictions canceling each other out. Her relationship with her family creates emotional touchstones that ground the show's more surreal elements in recognizable human experiences. Her frustration with Peter's behavior, her concern for her children's well-being, and her own occasional lapses into questionable judgment all feel authentic, despite occurring within completely unrealistic scenarios. She becomes the emotional center around which all the chaos can orbit safely. The supporting characters in Quahog create a community ecosystem that feels both intimately familiar and completely unpredictable. Neighbors like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland form a social network that somehow manages to remain stable despite regular exposure to Peter's reality-warping influence. Their friendship operates on the kind of dream logic where people can be simultaneously best friends and completely incompatible personalities, where loyalty and annoyance coexist without creating lasting conflict. These relationships mirror the kind of social connections that exist in small communities where people are stuck with each other regardless of whether they actually like each other. The result is a social dynamic where characters have learned to accept and work around each other's flaws rather than trying to change them, creating a sense of unconditional acceptance that's both touching and slightly disturbing. The show's approach to problem-solving reflects this same community dynamic, where issues are rarely resolved through traditional methods, but instead get worked around, ignored, or transformed into different problems that are somehow more manageable. Characters don't really grow and change in traditional narrative arcs, but they do develop coping strategies and adaptive behaviors that allow them to function within their chaotic environment. This creates a viewing experience that's surprisingly relaxing despite the constant chaos, because you learn to trust that somehow everything will work out in ways that might not make sense, but will feel satisfying within the show's internal logic. It's like being assured that no matter how complicated your dreams get, you'll always wake up in your own bed with all your problems exactly where you left them. The show's treatment of time and memory creates layers of nostalgia that operate simultaneously across multiple decades of cultural history. Episodes regularly feature flashbacks to different time periods that may or may not be consistent with previously established character histories, creating a sense that the past is fluid and changeable, rather than fixed and determined. This approach to history mirrors how memory actually works in human consciousness, where details shift and change based on current emotional needs rather than maintaining strict factual accuracy. Characters sometimes remember the same events differently in different episodes, and these conflicting memories are presented as equally valid, rather than evidence of inconsistent writing. This creates a universe where subjective experience matters more than objective truth, where what feels right is more important than what actually happened according to some external standard of accuracy. The result is a storytelling approach that feels surprisingly honest about how human memory and family mythology actually function. Families create shared stories about their history that serve emotional and social functions rather than documentary purposes. And these stories change over time to meet the evolving needs of the family system. Family Guy captures this dynamic perfectly by treating its own history as a living, breathing entity, rather than a fixed record of past events. As we reach the end of our journey through the wonderfully contradictory universe of Family Guy, it becomes clear that the show's greatest achievement might be its ability to create comfort through chaos, familiarity through absurdity, and relaxation through constant activity. The show operates like a perfect sleep aid for the modern mind, providing just enough stimulation to keep you engaged while maintaining just enough consistency to keep you feeling safe and secure. The lore of Family Guy isn't really about the specific details of character histories or plot continuities. Instead, it's about creating a universe where change and stability can coexist, where contradictions don't need resolution, and where the most important truth is that somehow, everything always works out in the end, even when it doesn't make any logical sense. In a world where consistency and predictability often feel like distant memories, Family Guy offers the radical proposition that maybe coherence is overrated anyway. Maybe what we really need is a space where we can let go of our need for everything to make sense and just enjoy the ride, secure in the knowledge that no matter how weird things get, we're still fundamentally safe in this animated universe where love conquers all, even when love looks suspiciously like mutual tolerance for each other's most annoying qualities. So, as you drift off tonight, remember that somewhere in an animated Rhode Island, a family of lovable disasters continues their eternal cycle of chaos and reconciliation, proving night after night that sometimes the best stories are the ones that never really end. They just keep getting more interesting. Sweet dreams from Quahog, where nothing makes sense and everything works out exactly the way it should.